I wanted to shout out Shade for making me look into Viper Strike of MAMBA. I got inspired to play it thanks to him. And you know, he was showcasing his SSF hardcore run with MAMBA and it looked pretty good. So he sent some POBs my way and some general item stats, that kind of stuff. Organized the POB and yeah. So thanks a lot for the help there and appreciate you. Yo guys, Tuna here. Finally finished writing my Viper Strike of MAMBA guide and in general also have refined the POB and all that kind of stuff. So this video is intended to be a full build guide detailing everything about the skill, everything you need to know, including the progression, as well as the written guide, and of course the POB also to match up with that. And I'll just show you guys how to navigate all of that information since Path of Exile, pretty complicated game. Yeah. So first of all, I wanted to explain a little bit about Viper Strike of MAMBA and why it's good, or the mechanics and all of that kind of stuff. So Viper Strike of MAMBA is fairly unique in that it allows you to sum up the damage of both your main and your offhand. When you strike, it acts as though you're pretty much wearing like a two-handed weapon, right? So like you get like two swords, and then the sum of those two swords is added up, and you know, the damage is then dealt to whoever you strike with Viper Strike of MAMBA. And the reason why it's so powerful is because poison, you know, scales incredibly well off of base damage and flat damage and that kind of stuff. So yeah, it just allows you to basically get a very massive hit with very good damage effectiveness onto monsters, then use secondary mechanics from Pathfinder, like proliferation from you know, the Ascendancy, to spread that poison across the monsters that are near your main target. Before we move on, I would like to thank today's sponsor, Exit Lag. Exit Lag is a software that is designed to reduce ping and latency and mitigate the risk of disconnects during online games. It includes tools to also improve your frame per second. So like a little bit of optimization, as you can see here by the PC boost section. So you can go through there and also boost your FPS and stuff like that. But most importantly, it's a tool that's designed to basically reduce the latency to servers all around the world. So in my example, I play a lot of Path of Exile, right? And I live in Italy. Italy is just notorious because instead of using fiber optics here, we use spaghetti. It's terrible. So the first thing that you'll do is you go to your library, and what you'll do is you click onto Path of Exile. What it's going to do now is it's going to analyze where you currently are. It's going to look for the best routes to take. So we're just going to re-optimize here so you guys can see what the process is. And now it's doing its like magic behind the scenes. It's like looking through all the wires and stuff and figuring out how it can get me the best latency possible. And then we'll analyze what that looks like in game. All right, as soon as that is analyzed, you can see here that it's like looking through whatever this magic is doing. You know, it's like it's got its own little like proprietary, insane little technology going on. But now we're connected to the Path of Exile server, so we're going to be trying to show off what it looks like, what my latency looks like while this is off. I'm going to be clicking these off first, and I'll show you what it looks like in game. We can see here at the top right in this graph, you see that I am currently connected and I'm getting about 35 millisecond latency to the servers, which is, you know, not all that bad. But once we enable exit lag, which we can do just by going through here and enabling that there and also enabling that here, we're going to apply the routes, and this is going to disconnect us, of course, since, you know, it's basically like taking us through a different place on the internet. But now we can go back in game and check our graphs again. I'm gonna fucking cheat this because it doesn't do anything, bro. Like, fucking A. Don't include that either, bro. Alright, so post login with everything enabled, you can see that it actually brought down our latency by about 15 ms. So it's working. But most importantly, what we're hoping for is better stability. Check out the description, guys, for 50% off. They're running a really good offer, so check them out. Thank you very much, Exelag, for sponsoring the video. It does extremely well at dealing with mechanics where a lot of monsters are closely packed together. So the best thing that this build is good at is Expedition, as well as Breach, Blight, Essence, and in general, just all of those sort of like tightly knit mechanics where you have like a ton of monsters, as you can see here from the screen, because of the Pathfinder proliferation, and also just because of the mechanics of the skill itself, are like how much damage a singular poison does, and then how that proliferates onto nearby monsters. Now, if because of the upside of Viper Strike of Mamba summing up your main and offhand, the downside of the skill is that you're only allowed to have a maximum of 1 poison on the target that you're striking. Meaning you really are sort of like upfronting your damage when compared to other poison skills, which usually have somewhat of a ramp up time and a duration, right? Viper Strike of Mamba really goes hard at scaling, faster poisons, and it does not scale you like duration much like other poison skills. It's much more akin to what you'd imagine ignites to be, right? So what happens is that when you stack faster poison, it literally just ends up being more DPS because of the fact that you're limited to 1. To give you guys just a very quick example of what this means is, imagine you are killing monsters within a pack, and this is one rare monster, which are usually very tanky, and then you have a few gray monsters around this guy, which is generally what a rare monster pack looks like, right? So if I was to go here and inflict a poison onto this guy, and this guy proliferates a poison onto this guy as well as onto this guy, because it's anyone within that radius there. So we'll go like this, for example. Then these guys would also die, and then these also proliferate off to this guy, and then then also to these, and then these go onto here. So what you can imagine is that because we have one singular poison that deals very high DPS, right? Unlike other poison builds that have very small damage dealing poisons but stack up many of them, what ends up happening is that every monster here, and of course on top of the limit of Viper Strike of Mamba, which is 1 poison per enemy, Pathfinder Proliferation circumvents this and also makes use of the fact that this damage being poison is generally very, very high. You can see that based off of the numbers in Path of Building. What this means is that your clear and your ability to kill rare monsters and that kind of stuff is very dependent on the amount of monsters that are near that rare monster. So for mechanics like Expedition and that kind of stuff, this is why it excels so much at this. Usually you have like these like Thanos monsters in the middle of the pack that are like really scary, and with a lot of like sort of gray monsters around it. But this mechanic then just allows you to just kill a rare monster and then multiply your damage per monster into that pack and sort of funnel into the rare monsters, which is why Viper Strike of Mamba is such a powerful skill, and why you really need to tailor your mechanics to favor these, to favor the build, because it is quite specialized in what it can achieve. But when you do make use of these mechanics, it's just absolutely insane, right? And which is why I'm league starting it. So enough about the mechanics. I'm going to go a little bit into the steps of progression and that sort of stuff. And it's all things that you guys can get access to by looking at the max roll guide. This is going to be linked in the description, so you can kind of go through here. And the main steps are, as you can see, it shows essentially what your skills are, the progression for that, and it details each step, why you're doing each separate thing. So you can scroll through here with the plus and minus button at the very bottom. As you press that there, move our cam just so you guys can see. You can see that like all the steps of progression for the campaign, when to swap, and it also details when you're swapping to Viper Strike of Mamba. But I'm gonna talk about that a little bit here because it's really important. A lot of people think you need clusters in order to swap to Viper Strike of Mamba, but you don't. Clusters are very good. They give about 30% damage per cluster at the very start, and it sort of tapers off as you get more and more because of diminishing returns. Viper Strike of Mamba, the only thing you need is one-handed swords and the Viper Strike of Mamba gem. You can level Viper Strike of Mamba from the very start, from level 1 if you have the skill gem. But of course, on league start, people need to run lab in order to get the skill gem. So usually you sort of delay that either until normal lab or until merciless lab. Now, whether you want to delay that until merciless lab, that is totally up to you, which is why here in the very end of the guide, don't mind the broken link, at the very end of the guide, I have a step-by-step campaign walkthrough of how you would level with Poisonous Concoction for anybody that wants to go down that route. But in the remainder of the guide, I am mostly going to be covering how you're going to be leveling with Viper Strike of Mamba. In this video as well, I'll be talking more about Viper Strike of Mamba, but essentially what you do is level 1 to 12. You're going to be running with Caustic Arrow. This can also be Cobra Lash. Some people prefer Cobra Lash, but I prefer Caustic Arrow. And you link that with Pierce and Void Manipulation, and you run until you get to the Merveil's Cavern. And once you get to Merveil's Cavern, you unlock Poisonous Concoction. Poisonous Concoction allows you to turn your life flask into your damage, and it also allows you to drop your weapon, and you don't really need to worry about the weapon anymore. There are a few downsides with this. The downside is mostly that you're just going to be running out of life flasks constantly. So run 2 or 3 life flasks at all times during the campaign. It's going to make your life a lot better. And yeah, just that's all. And as soon as you get the Relic Cache Pantheon, allocate that. It's going to be helpful later on because it will generate life flasks for you. Until you really get that life flask sustain from your Ascendancy. So you're going to be running Poisonous Concoction ideally until you get your Viper Strike of Mamba gem, either in the first lab or in Merc lab. Now, if you were to get it in the first lab, you would swap Viper Strike of Mamba with added Chaos Damage, Melee Fizz, and Fortify. The melee skills, so we can use Fortify, we get 20% damage reduction from that. Melee Fizz just gives us a ton of damage and also added Chaos because we are going to be starving on that flat damage early. You can get pretty tanky with this build pretty early on. I recommend running Purity of Elements in the campaign so that you can actually get Ailment Immune. It's going to be like very useful for you, and it also allows you to sort of more easily swap gear as you get it, which means making your links and socket links and all that kind of stuff will just be substantially easier. So when you swap to a Viper Strike of Mamba, you absolutely need to have a Battle Mage's Cry Auto Exertion setup with Alchemist Mark. This just straight up doubles your damage. This automatically triggers when you hit monsters, and it drops this puddle on the floor of damage over time. Pretty good. And as soon as you spec into Whispers of Doom, you're going to be also socketing Despair into that setup. Now, we also use Withering Step. Withering Step is going to be what is applying our Wither. Our Ascendancy is not actually going to be consistent enough for us because our Ascendancy applies Wither on hit. But since we're not really hitting that many times, it's just fake, right? So you're going to be relying on Withering Step. Getting quality on this early will just be really nice because the quality gives you additional Wither debuffs. The more of that you have, the better, right? It starts off with like 5 Wither debuffs, and it goes up to 7, and then with the quality, eventually you can get up to like 14. So it's a decent amount of Wither stacks on there for sure, but it's definitely not what POB max is, right? We also want to use Auto Exertion and Ancestral Cry. The reason for Ancestral Cry is because it gives 2 additional strikes, which usually is limited to either the Attack Mastery or Eldritch Glove implicit, but putting it on Auto Exertion circumvents that. It allows you to more easily have access to additional strikes, which increases your clear and that sort of stuff. Ambush is okay for an additional damage, but you genuinely don't need this. It's kind of just there as a button to press in between other things, on single target. If you just want to deal a little bit more damage, it can be about 15% extra damage for pressing that for, practically no downside, right? Now, another tip that I have for you guys is make sure you're linking your Whirling Blade to Brutality, because as I previously mentioned, Viper Strike of Mamba is limited to 1 poison, and if you accidentally poison with something like Whirling Blade, it's going to kind of mess up that first poison damage bonus that you're getting from your clusters. Additionally, your quality on Viper Strike of Mamba provides 40% more damage with poison multiplicative, right? So this amount of damage is not to be scoffed at. You want to be putting Gem Cutter's Prisms into your Viper Strike of Mamba as soon as possible. It'll just increase your damage by an absolute ton. Now, a few other mechanics that I want to shout out are Petrified Blood when combined with Master Alchemist, I believe it's called. Yes. Master Surgeon. And Master Surgeon basically makes your life flask, it makes your life flask regenerate even after your health is full. It kind of acts as though you have like overleech of some sort. So crafting a really good life flask is mandatory for this build. And this also allows you to offset the downside of Petrified Blood, which is usually you cannot regenerate beyond 50% HP. But with the life flask you can, so it gives you the extra 50% HP, but also then provides the damage reduction of Petrified Blood, which is, 40%, which is just crazy. Additionally, that also means that we can use Sorrow of the Divine, and this flask allows for your energy shield regeneration to be, for your life flask regeneration from flasks to also apply to your energy shield. And since we are using hybrid evasion energy shield bases, we're going to have a ton of energy shield, meaning it's just like a ton of overleech all the time. It's just going to prop up your life, and in combination with the damage reductions that we get from Petrified Blood, well as Blood and Sand, as well as Fortify, and all of the base HP and all that kind of stuff, you actually just become very, very tanky. The order of ascendancies is very important, because if you want to be using Viper Strike with Mamba from the first lab, you need to get Master Toxicist. Without Master Toxicist, Viper Strike with Mamba is practically, it's just not a skill. It's non-existent. I mean, because you're hitting one target at a time, right? Of course, like maybe 3 with your additional strikes. But because of that, the damage is no spread, right? So like without the spread, it's just garbage. So you need Master Toxicist first, and then from there, going to be grabbing the additional flash charges. You need the flash charges as well, because Master Toxicist is enabled during flask effects, so this adds a lot of quality of life there. Finally, we go for Master Surgeon there, and in Uber Lab, we take Nature's Reprisal, which is going to be boosting the damage provided from Withering Step, and, you know, by providing extra Withered effect. But the Wither on hit is cosmetic, so yeah. For Pantheons, you need to have Brine King upgraded until you have Storm Shroud as part of your build. And this is because this is the only way that you're going to be getting Freeze Avoidance, as we'll get Chill Avoidance from Boot Movement Speed in Prefix Craft, and we'll get Shock Avoidance from either a a Boot Craft specifically with Eldritch Implicit and Torment Essence Explicit, or from a Belt Torment Explicit, as well as the Abyssal. For your Minor Pantheon, for general purpose, I would say that Gruth Cool is very, very strong. We are an avoidance build, but we do not have like 80-90% avoidance. We're like sitting at 60%. So we are going to be getting hit, and this sort of like refreshes every time you do. So essentially it allows you to get like 5% maximum phys damage reduction in mapping scenarios, and it also reduces enemy monster attack speed by 8%, which is pretty decent. But it's kind of like your minor ascendancy is very, you can change it around. Like, of course, like Rislatha is very good. It gives you life flask charges if you haven't used one. It's not good because of that, but since, sometimes you do get to low life, you have increased recovery rate from flasks. So if you ever do hit your life flask when on low life, it's pretty decent, but I would recommend you either stick to Gruth Cool, Aberath when you're farming red altars. Tukohama is also very good because you are going to be standing still to apply your poisons with Mamba. And that's pretty much it. Shikari is pretty useful in some maps where they have poison on hit if you're running T16.5s or T17s. But yeah, so it's going to be Brine King first of all until you have Storm Shroud. And then when you have Storm Shroud, you go for either a Lunaris or Solaris. These are both absolutely insane. I think Solaris is the best value usually, because of the reduced elemental damage you take if you've taken hits recently, as well as the additional physical damage reduction when you're bossing, and 20% chance to take 50% less damage from area damage, which is also pretty good because in maps a lot of the time you're dying from those like delirium area damage things. The upgrade on this one, it gives you crit avoidance, but it's not extremely useful since we are sort of somewhat crit avoidant because of the mastery. So I would say that Lunaris just has the best value when fully upgraded. But yeah, these are quite interchangeable. Know that you want to be changing them depending on the content you run, so keep that in mind. All right, so looking at the passive tree here from the build, you'll see at the top that there are a bunch of variants. There's Poisonous Concoction leveling. If you wish to go up until, maps or even beyond with Poisonous Concoction, has a total of 103 passives allocated. And there's also a Mamba leveling variant. And then these, when you use the arrows here at the top, it's going to scroll back and give you the order of what to spec and when on league start. So it's just to make you understand respecs and that kind of stuff. So just to go and take a look through, I'll give you guys an idea of what you're looking for here. So you're going to be Caustic Arrow at this point. So grabbing projectile damage is really good. And it's also going to be good for your Poisonous Concoction. You want to be going through Primal Spirit. Primal Spirit gives you Flask Sustain because it gives 4 mana per hit if you've used a flask in the last 10 seconds, meaning, you are an attack, so you're going to be getting that mana back. And early on, when you have like those tiny little mana flasks, this just helps a ton. So going through here, so you can use Frostblink as well as Flame Dash and that kind of stuff. Then you go for your life flash charges here, and you grab that Mastery, gain 1 flash charge every 3 seconds. This will be very useful for Poisonous Concoction. Then from here, the next step will be to grab Toxic Strikes. We do not have a 100% chance to poison early on, so Toxic Strikes is going to sort of like work us towards this. And it's the smallest pathing to a damage node. And early on, we just kind of want that damage, right? Heart of Oak is going to be giving you a tiny bit of life regeneration if you use a flask, but most importantly, life. So this will bolster your life pool early on. From there, now we are using Poisonous Concoction, so we want to be grabbing as many of these life flask nodes as possible so that we don't run out of these life flasks, as it can be really annoying. The Mastery here, you can spec whenever. It gives 300% increased damage for the initial poison, which is like front loads your damage a lot more, which is really nice. Then Swift Venoms for more chance to poison as well as more damage, and attack speed for smoothness. And then at this point, this is when you would be swapping to Mamba, right? So we do a few respecs here, you can see. And if you're still Poisonous Concoction, like of course swap over to this tree instead. But yeah, at that point is when we would be swapping to Viper Strike with Mamba. So scrolling back a bit, you can see that we respec all of these projectile nodes. We go down here, we take all those out, and then we put that forward to Mark Effect because we're using Alchemist Mark, as well as pathing through this life here. And not to have this awkward square as well, we want to respec that node. Then from there, we want to go all the way to the top here to get the remainder chance to hit, chance to poison, sorry, as well as the mastery that makes enemies poisoned by you not deal any critical hits. And also here we have the 20% faster poison mastery. From there, accuracy. You can grab this at any point depending on how much accuracy you have, although sword implicits give accuracy, so that's going to be pretty good for you. Like, it's going to be easy to cap your accuracy. And just a reminder that you can always use precision, level precision up depending on how much accuracy you need. Just open up your character panel and yeah, you'll be able to see basically how much accuracy you have. So all right, so this one is a bit contentious. Like, you can rush Clever Thief whenever you want. I generally feel like the mana sustain is pretty good with Primal Spirit and a Mana Flask up until this point. And when you do spec Clever Thief, you cannot instantly drop a Mana Flask because your hit damage is like pretty low, meaning you're still going to need to have a Mana Flask for emergency situations since your auto exert setups are constantly just consuming. But that's going to be nice for later once we get a little bit more mana and hit damage and that kind of stuff. So proportionally, you're just going to be regenerating enough. And now we also want to be lowering the cost of our attacks as well as grabbing some reservation efficiency. So taking these nodes. All right, from there, now we get some more damage. We go for Fangs of the Viper and some life, as well as Sleight of Hand and Entropy. So there's just a bunch of damage here. And at this point, that's why we want to beeline it all the way to Whispers of Doom. On the way, we're going to grab a little bit of life. But the reason for Whispers of Doom is so that we can actually slot our Despair into our Battle Mage's Cry setup, which is like 30+% damage. So it's very worth pathing out to this one. And another thing to mention, like, you might think this is a lot of travel, but you are seriously lacking intelligence, not in real life, in game. So like grabbing these nodes is actually pretty good. The next step would be to grab this life here, so 2 travel nodes out to this evasion there. And then the 15% suppress if your helm, body armor, gloves, and boots all have evasion rating. These all can also be like hybrid evasion rating energy shield bases, but just make sure they have evasion rating, otherwise don't spec this. And you want to spec that in combination with Inveterate so that you can pump up your evasion rating, your suppress rating up as much as possible. And at this point also, like, it depends on how much you have, if you have suppress on the rest of your gear or whatever, but you can also spec the lucky suppress if you're like, 60% suppress or something like that. But you should be a bit higher by this point already. So yeah, lucky suppress is pretty decent. Then we go for charisma. Charisma is good because it allows you to then start socketing your additional auras and stuff. And make sure to revert back to the skill gem embed to take a look at what auras and when you want to fit them. But you're going to be running Purity of Elements, Petrified Blood once you have Master Surgeon. Then you also have Blood and Sand and all of your Auto Exert setups. Next step is going to be grabbing Leader of the Pack, which is going to allow you to get all of those reservations in, as well as some more life. And we're going to be doing some pathing shenanigans here. Grab the Flask nodes, and next we're also grabbing these Flask nodes. The Flask nodes are good because we're Pathfinder. Sorrow of the Divine is really good. Going to also give us life flask charges. Going to give us that sustain back and all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, flasks, good. And yeah, that pretty much sums up the leveling variant of the tree, which then allows you to progress over to the Mamba early. And between the leveling and the Mamba early, there's very minimal changes. It's like just a couple of passives here and there. The mid is when things start to get really interesting, because this is when we're going to be using our clusters. And sorry about like how this looks, it's a bit buggy, but in the POB it should be a lot more obvious, right, what it looks like. which is a bit buggy here. We've been trying to figure it out, but yeah. Not even GGG figured that one out for their own website. Apparently it's a nightmare, but I'm just glad not to be the guy that codes these kind of things. Anyways, you're going to want to be getting a large cluster with ideally aggressive defense. And this is going to enable you to get better fortify uptime. And then disease vector to make enemies that are you poison not regenerate life. Regeneration can be pretty nasty against poisons, so pretty good. So yeah, these two together ideally, but just be mindful that you do not need a cluster with notables on it for it to be worth to socket a cluster for your you really just want mediums with low tolerance, right? Low tolerance is just so much damage. You only ever inflict one poison on the enemy. That poison deals 300% increased damage multiplied by how many of these you have. It's so much damage. So you want to be grabbing as many low tolerances as possible. So even just like an empty cluster is fine. It doesn't matter. Just chuck that in. You're going to be grabbing that disease vector aggressive defense with low tolerance. And for your medium cluster, you also want to socket in a small with mortifying aspect. This will allow you to drop the nodes over here and also swap to malevolence once you have got your avoid chance to shock and your avoid chance to chill on your boots crafted. So make sure you're doing that first. But yeah, you want to be grabbing as many lower tolerances as possible. We want to have one set up here and another set up there. If you don't have any passive skills, you don't need like a second notable here, as I said. But if you don't have any passive skills, just spec only low tolerance into the jewel socket. For small jewels, ideally just life and damage deals faster. So damaging ailments deal faster is just a more multiplier for you because you only apply one instance of poisons. Grabbing those is pretty good. And anything else to sort of like, plug the holes in your build, like attributes, resistances, and that kind of stuff, you can outsource to jewels as well. So that's going to be like your mid-game sort of cluster swap. Now we're getting into the interesting side, like the pneumatics. At this point, you would grab a graft of treachery, or like what are they called? A rune graft of treachery. I'm pretty sure that's what they're called. And then you just chuck it here on this. It doesn't matter which mastery you grab, but yeah, you just put it on here. It's going to give you 15% reservation efficiency, which allows you to drop that small cluster that we had before in favor of Enduring Composure. Enduring Composure regenerates your endurance charges. So that's going to be like when you get hit, you get endurance charges, and it's going to keep itself topped up. And that's pretty much all of the changes in this tree. Now, one thing I forgot to mention is that you want a Glorious Vanity, and it's going to be in the name of Doriani, which is actually wrong here, and I'm going to fix that right now. All right, so you want to get that Doriani jewel in because that gives you 15% of your life as extra energy shield. And because we're using Sorrow of the Divine, the unique flask that I mentioned earlier, that energy shield is going to be topped up by your Master Surgeon life flask regeneration. You're not looking for like any sort of like seed here. You don't care too much about the notables. They're quite expensive to pass to. So just make sure you have that Doriani, and anything else doesn't really matter at this point. From here, it's just small adjustments to the passive skill tree for the most part. But big adjustments to the gear that you're using. So in endgame, you can grab voices. Now, the less empty passives that grant nothing, the better. I put 5 passives in, because they're cheap as hell. 3 passives are pretty expensive, but if you can afford 3 passives, that's obviously better. It saves you 2 nothing slots there. That's going to be like 4 extra passives that you have to play around with. And ideally then you want to start getting like a couple of brute for potency, low tolerance. The reason for brute for potency is just because it gives you flask charges gained, right? As well as increased recovery from flasks, which bumps up your Master Surgeon. Finally, the last variant of this build is going to be using Whispers of Infinity. It's going to be stacking mana to prop up your damage. So that allows you to also ignore mana costs and things like that. So you can drop a little bit of that. And additionally, you can also look to get a Light of Meaning in here to outsource a lot of the chaos resistance from your gear onto the passive skill tree. Now, let's take a look at the gear. In the early game, when you swap the Viper Strike of MAMBA, you want to get a sword like this. You want to get as much physical damage as possible on the sword. And if you can, if it's item level 83 plus, you can guarantee Reforge with Harvest for a chaos damage roll that allows you to basically just get a lot of damage for very cheap and then just craft physical damage on it, and that'll be it. So you're going to look for a sword like this. Ideally, Legion Sword is the best base. It also provides a ton of accuracy rating. It's going to be a lot easier for you to cap accuracy this way, so it's pretty useful. And the rest of your gear is very box standard. In early game, we're not really looking for any Eldritch Implicits, but if you did look for Eldritch Implicits, I have a few examples here that you can look at, like additional strikes, affecting your marks. You can grab Aura Effect on your chest, or Fist Taken As, that kind of stuff, right? But ideally, early, we just want to prioritize getting, our resistances up, as much life as possible, getting our mana costs down, just the very standard stuff. But your flasks, on the other hand, are things that you want to be getting in order ASAP. So getting a very high regeneration or recovery Divine Life Flask, as well as your Sorrow of the Divine, and also ideally a Taste of Hate as well. Taste of Hate is really good because it's sort of like a soft core way to patch up your maximum elemental resistances as well as your elemental damage mitigation. For example, if you have tri-elemental flasks like I do here in this variant, you're going to have to drop a Quicksilver and your Silver Flask, which is going to drastically decrease your speed. But you're going to be getting additional like 40% extra max hit from these flasks for each elemental type. Now, what this allows you to do is, since Taste of Hate basically makes you take 50% of the damage from lightning and fire hits as cold, and it also gives you maximum cold resistance, it essentially halves the amount of damage reduction that you would get to light and fire, but full for cold. So it's kind of like a very high value for one flask, and then it also enables you to use a silver flask as well as a Quicksilver flask. But if you do want to go for a if you do want to go for a less zoomy, more tanky variant, you can of course opt in for the Tri-Ele flasks instead. Now, once we're getting into mid-game, that's when you want to be crafting your clusters. On average, it costs 100 Orbs of Alterations to craft low tolerance, and also a small cluster for Mortifying Aspect to, lessen the cost of your reservations. You want to be getting Avoid Chance to Chill and Avoid Chance to Shock, very important on your belt. So you're going to be seeing Avoid Chance to Shock on your belt and Avoid Chance to Chill Movement Speed Hybrid craft here, well as a jewel, which gives you 50. So you want a 100% chance to avoid shock, a 100% chance to avoid chill, and the Brine King Pantheon at this point. Then for the rest, just spam your lesser Eldritch Embers to get a couple of implicits here and there. Reservation Efficiency on Helmet, Despair Curse Effect, Mark Effect, as well as Fist Taken As. Cold is ideal, but any is fine. Non-curse effect or aura effect, that sort of stuff. Okay, the next big sort of like milestone will be the pneumatic dagger swap. Pneumatic daggers allow you to essentially deal or craft your daggers with elemental damage essences, and it allows you to poison with that elemental damage. So as you can read here, all damage from hits with this weapon can poison. Then we can use hatred, or we can use wrath essences, or alternatively anger. But ideally you want like hatred, wrath, or hatred or anger, because they have less variance on there. But whatever essence you can get early is totally fine. You just want 2 high tier elemental damage rolls combined with hits can't be evaded, which lets you circumvent the need for any accuracy, as well as, for monsters that generally have very high evasion or that kind of stuff, like from Expedition, this will guarantee that you're hitting them all the time. That's pretty good. Then you want to apply a Rune Graft of Treachery onto your Evasion Mastery, as I said previously in the passive skill section of this video, and swap your Purity of Elements for Malevolence, since you have previously already fixed your avoidances and stuff like that. But this then also allows you to fix your shock through your boots and eventually through Storm Shroud. The Storm Shroud makes your shock avoidance apply to all other ailments, so boots like this. At that point, you would swap the Avoid Chill craft for just like normal movement speed, but you still want to make sure that you have a combined 100% chance to avoid shock. And if you don't have a combined with the implicit and explicit, you can always still just grab an Abyss Jewel and socket it in your passive skill tree. It's totally fine. Your belt, you're going to get Tides of Time. Tides of Time gives you 100% increased life recovery rate from flasks. That props up both your energy shield and life recovery rate a lot. And you can get like utility flask as well as life flask gain, but that's less important. Don't worry about that too much. That's generally what the largest price variance is going to be, is like the flasks you gain. Ideally, you want to be getting some extra utility flasks for sure. So if you want to prioritize that role if you're going to get one. Your amulet, you can anoint Scion's Ambition. This is the only real anoint that matters for this build. In previous versions, you're just grabbing whatever damage, whatever cheapest damage you can. But at this point, when you get an amulet that's like pretty good, Scion's Ambition doubles the range of your additional strikes, making the build feel like you have Wi-Fi arms, you know, just go gadget type stuff. And yeah, so you would want to get this on an amulet that's like pretty decent. Then in the end game, you're going to be swapping that amulet out for Ashes. Ashes gives, you know, 30% quality. And as I previously said, Viper Strike of Mamba gives 60%, 40% to more damage with poisons, baseline, but 30 quality adds up to a total of 60% more damage with poisons. So it's a crazy amount of damage. And it also then gives you additional Wither on your Withering Step and additional attack speed. Like, it's just a really good amulet for this build, as well as +1 for just a little bit of extra damage, and Anoint Scion's Ambition on there again. The final variant for this build is going to be using the Whispers of Infinity amulet. This amulet is insane. It was added last league. We don't know how rare it's going to be this league. If it's not super rare, I think it is 100% worth skipping the Pneumatic stage and going straight for the Mana stage, because it's no more difficult to itemize the Mana variant as opposed to the Pneumatic variant. But I wasn't really sure about the rarity of this amulet, so I didn't want to put it as like the only variant you guys can have. So now you have the option between, if it's common, you know, skip to this variant, and if it's not common, stick to Pneumatics. But essentially the gear that you're using here is the same as the MAMBA Pneumatic version, except it utilizes Whispers of Infinity, Chavral's Revelation in your right ring, as well as daggers that have mana, chaos damage, and damage over time multiplier on them. And then the rest you can just multi-mod. For the rest, you want to craft mana wherever possible in your prefixes. So you can see here from the gloves and the helmet, we're going to be grabbing mana. And the chest, you don't want to get mana on this one because the defenses are just way more valuable, right? So yeah. The endgame clusters with mana on them, these Eldritch Inspiration, Low Tolerance, they're just impossible to craft. So they take like 4,000 alterations. Just stick to Low Tolerance until you can afford to get a second one. I would just like recommend buying it. It's just absurd. And then you also want to be grabbing 2 clusters with ideally attributes and energy shield on them. You want 2-3 passives, and this is going to allow you to fit all of your reservations. All right, so just a few closing thoughts. I put out a video showcasing the Atlas strategies I'm going to be doing for this build on League Start. I think this build is insane at what it does. Like, it's absolutely insane. And there are some things it's just really bad at. So I think what content you run with it is very, very crucial. You know, like Breach, you would definitely want to be doing Breach if possible. It is Breach League after all. Like Expedition is just insane for this build, Blight as well. So like those kind of mechanics, man, like if you're running those, you're gonna have a good time. But if you're running Legion, you're gonna have a very bad time. It doesn't function with Legion whatsoever. So yeah, I'm just make sure that if you run this build, you run the content it's good at. That's all I really want to say. And for the remainder, I would sort of just like look through the guide and cross-reference that. And if you have any additional questions, you can always come ask. One thing to mention is that if you go anywhere here in the guide, let me close that down there, and you click on, for example, like any of these embeds, like if you were to click on this, it would open up the path, it would open up the planner. And what this planner allows me to do is it allows me to make updates to the guide if I ever find anything that's like crazy with the new league, like maybe a full-born unique or something like that. And if I make that change, it's automatically updated into the guide, because how we work in Maxroll, we like copy these embeds and we put them all into our guides, and everything is linked. That way we can kind of have a more flexible approach to updating our guides, and also just to make sure that things are, that things are synced up between our guides, our planners, and our POBs, because we now also have POB support. So I also wanted to mention POB support because I will get a bunch of questions about this. And of course, I want to outsource as much stuff as possible to the Maxroll, because I get revenue from this, right? Like, straight up, I make a decent amount of money from this stuff, but also because it allows me to keep everything in one place. So for example, if I was to click this POB link here, this link remains the same always. It never changes. this is gonna be the link that anytime I make an update, it's gonna be like outsourcing back to this link. So if I was to show you guys what link I'm talking about, it's this link right here. And also for you guys, if you want to copy this into POB, all you have to do is grab this, copy in POB, as you can see here, and then you can just chuck that in to your import code. We're working with local identity to get our links. Pretty much like you can export import directly in the POB. That would be ideal to come soon, but for the time being, we're doing it this way. Additionally, all of the other stuff like loot filter and that sort of stuff you can find here. And if I have any sort of like update videos and all that kind of stuff, it's going to be in the planner. So yeah, if there's any other stuff that I might have missed, I'm sure you guys will let me know in the comments. Or if there are things that you're wondering about or have any questions, you can drop by the stream. But aside from that, guys, like I've been rambling for 40 minutes. These PoE build videos are just fucking boring, honestly. So thanks for watching, and I hope this was informative, helpful, and I hope you guys have a great league start. And yeah, appreciate you. Bye bye.